Hello, it's the Curious Low back with another video. Now today we are going to be discussing Season 2, Episode 17 of iZOMBIE, Reflections of the Way Liv Used to Be. So this is the sort of penultimate episode of Season 2. We just have the epic two-parter coming up next week. So obviously this episode had a lot to go over. I'm going to try to keep it as brief and quick as possible, so we're just going to get right on into it. So the overall plot, just the monster of the week, as it were, is that there has been a girl at a local college who has been murdered. And because of that, we get a few callbacks to the frat episode from earlier in the season, as well as some of the things going on with Drake and the Seattle PD Vice Department. Overall, the actual plot of this episode, as it were, with the murder mystery, again, I think another one for the last few weeks that has been a little bit more on the back burner and more of a vessel for moving the overarching plots along, which is totally fine with me. We're nearing the end of the season. It was cool to get to see Liv sort of being herself, as it were, or similar to what she used to be before she was a zombie. Obviously, all of the things going into what's happening with Drake and the mystery of where he is, I loved that we were able to keep that fresh in our memories without necessarily moving it forward all that much. We already knew everything that was discussed in this episode about Drake. We already knew he was undercover. We knew he had worked with that vice cop. We know all of these things, but they kept it fresh so that it doesn't feel like they talked about it last week and then dropped it for a week and then talked about it next week. So I appreciate that they kept it within the characters' minds, and even made it sort of a driving force for part of why Liv was so gung-ho about the sort of focused brain that she was on. Obviously, we had the fun callbacks to the kind of bro frat episode, which was cool to get to see that character again because I think a lot of people really loved him. And they didn't have to bring him back. Obviously, he didn't really end up being a big part of the episode itself. So that was cool just to get to see him come back. I'm sure he's kind of a fan favorite, so I appreciated that. On the flip side, we have Ravi and Major dealing with the fact that Ravi has just discovered Major's sort of secret that he's been working for Max Rager. That was kind of crazy cliffhanger from last week. It sort of fizzled out at the beginning of this episode. They were kind of fighting, but overall, Major, because of the brain that he was on, was just extremely docile the whole episode. So that probably didn't move anywhere. I expected it to be a little bit more of kind of like a knocked out, drag out sort of thing after the way that Ravi reacted at the end of last episode. And it was just very kind of fizzled. There was nothing there. I understand that we have other things to deal with, but considering the cliffhanger that we had last episode, I sort of expected it to be bigger. Obviously, Blaine is still dealing with the fact that he has no memory. That didn't really move along at all, but sort of like with the Drake stuff, they kind of kept it in our forefronts, just reminding us that this is happening, and I'm sure that in the next two-parter it will certainly come up again. For, gosh, once in her life, I feel like Liv is not in crisis. Obviously, she's upset at Drake, and maybe it's just because of the brain that she was on, but Liv feels very out of all of the main plot lines that are happening right now. She's worried about Drake, but mostly she was just focused on the case at hand with Clive. And again, I'm just, more episodes that go on, the more I'm annoyed that Clive has not figured out that Liv is not psychic, but there is something else going on here because she acts like a crazy person every single week, and you'd think that he would realize that she is taking on the personas of people that have died, but that's neither here nor there. I'm really hoping that next week we get some resolution with that. I think the main thing that was really driving forward into next week's episode is the fact that the FBI and the lady with the dog groomer, were able to actually pin down Major is the Chaos Killer. And even though we have known that, obviously, since day one, it's never been a mystery to us. And it's cool that for once in a TV show, we have some sort of like, ooh, a main character is like a serial killer, which is a very kind of cliche thing to do. And the fact that that isn't actually what's happening, that he's actually just been turning them into popsicles, which sounds ridiculous, and hopefully being able to cure them someday is actually pretty cool. So going forward into next week, I'm pretty excited to see where they go with that. There was a lot of setup this week, a lot of, obviously we need to figure out what's going on with Drake. We need to figure out what's going on with Major, who has just been arrested. Liv, like I said, she's like the only person that isn't in crisis right now. She's just kind of doing her own thing, sort of hoping that Drake is okay. I imagine that that situation will probably get a little more dire as we go into the finale, just because they've been kind of building that relationship. And it's cool that, again, something much like Major is a serial killer, but he's not really. This is something else that I think iZOMBIE sort of turned on its head almost, is that we've got the sort of boyfriend that's been keeping a secret, and we sort of think that, oh, it's because he's working for this big drug cartel thing, but it's actually that he's a vice cop and is undercover, and that's why he's been being so secretive. So it's these two things that you expect to be like, oh, these characters are actually really bad, but it's like, well, no, they're actually really good. That's why these things are being kept secret. So overall, exciting episode, a great setup for the finale next week. I can't wait to see where we go. In the meantime, if you guys have any questions, things that I missed, funny lines, there were a million of them. I'm a little disappointed that we didn't have the intro at the beginning of the episode, but I think it's just because there was so much to get through within this episode that they just had to cut that down a little bit. As always, the title cards are hilarious, so if you guys have a favorite one, go ahead and stick it in the comments below. If you have any more direct questions that you'd like to ask the rest of the Geekvolution team, please join us on Sunday night for Geekvolution 0 Hour. I unfortunately will not be able to be there, but everyone else will be, and I'm pretty sure almost everybody is watching iZombie right now, so you'll be able to ask them any questions that you have. Alright, see you guys next week for another Primetime Crisis episode involving iZombie and the finale. Bye!